Okay, so I understand that there's a lot of forms of art out there, but I'm not gonna lie to you, I am in no way an artist. Even though I'm called a content creator, and the word create is, well, many things in this world, one thing I will say is that I cannot create art. And today's story is basically how I ended up doing it with my art teacher. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another insane story. So today's story is something a little insane. Now, I think you guys know, I've basically had my fair history with doing it with teachers, and I won't lie, I love my teachers. Like, I love them so much to the point where I end up doing the devil's tango with them. But honestly, today's story is basically of how I ended up doing my art teacher, and honestly, it all starts off back when I was in grade 11. You see, in grade 11, I ended up taking an art course because I needed to get some extra credits to make sure I had enough for graduation. And I think we all know, if you guys are in high school, that getting credits for high school to graduate is honestly something that sucks. But basically, I remember back when I was in high school, I was able to take an art class, and this art class had a really cool teacher that for some reason everyone liked. Now me, I didn't really care about art, but honestly, knowing that there was an easygoing teacher in that class, obviously I'm gonna go take it. I think for many of us that go to high school, I think we all know that if there was like a better teacher to go to, we're gonna go to that teacher, no matter the subject. So I remember my first day of art class, I ended up going in there. When I did, I saw the art teacher. She was actually an attractive blonde girl that was kind of just, how do I put this? Very spontaneous. Like, you know those girls that are really over dramatic about everything, even though it means the littlest to nothing? That was basically her. Like, no joke, one thing I found really annoying about her as well is that for some reason, when she was like on topic about something, like for example, how to stroke your brush and stuff like that, she would keep going on and on and on as if the brush was like the next Stephen Hawking. And that guy was on a wheelchair. Like, I don't know, man. I really did not care enough to listen to this teacher. And I remember basically, I ended up just doing what I had to do and just getting my credits and leaving. Because don't get me wrong, everyone loved this teacher because she was outgoing, but at the same time, she was basically unbearable to listen to. Anyways, as the semester went on, I remember we ended up getting a new unit called pottery. Now, pottery, I think we all know what it is, and we all seen it in the movies, where basically it's like you're shaping these cool bowls and cups and vases and basically make it out of like clay. And I remember me, I really did not like it, because one thing I really care about is having clean hands. Like, I'm not a germaphobe or a freak in any sense, but I like having clean hands, okay? And if you want me to grab something that literally looks like something that comes out of me, it's pretty awkward. But anyways, I remember I sat down and basically the teacher was going through pottery and stuff, and I remember I was like, okay, whatever. And I basically ended up sitting down, spinning that wheel, and basically getting my pottery on, as some artists would say. I remember as I was making pottery though, making just a basic bowl that I could probably just use for my Nisquik cereal, I remember the teacher was walking around the classroom helping students to make sure they don't mess up, because some students really want to impress this teacher and make some like ginormous vase that they're probably never going to use. Like, no joke, like some of them were so ugly that I don't even think my grandma would use. Anyways, going on though, I remember she ended up coming up to me, and when she saw I was making a simple bowl, for some reason she loved it. I remember she ended up coming up behind me and saying, oh, like, what are you making that bowl for? My cereal is what I told her. And she ended up laughing, and funny enough, she said that I should like fix the curve on it more so when the milk goes in, it's easier. And as she was like showing me, I remember I kept messing it up and didn't understand what she meant. So as a teacher, she did what she was supposed to do, help me out. But the way she helped me out was, well, I don't even think it was legal. She basically came up behind me and spread her legs and put her like legs around my back, kind of, to the point where she was kind of like over me, like, you know the ones that where you see in like those like movies where it's like romantic and stuff and like they're doing pottery together. She kind of did that to me, and she kind of like started like putting her hands on my hands, and like basically we ended up having this romantic scene. I remember two kids in the class actually ended up recording that moment, and it was actually super awkward, and I'm just sitting there kind of just thinking like, okay, this is getting really weird. But then I remember as I looked over my shoulder, I remember my like jawline basically ended up hitting her, well, cherries, and that's when it happened. When I got that connection of my face hitting cherries, honestly, I was thinking of one of two things. One, I was thinking about a motorboat, and no, I don't mean the literal motorboat. And the other thing I was thinking about was, well, how bricked I got. For some reason, I got really attracted to the teacher ever since that day, and I got seriously bricked every time I thought about the art teacher. It's like she casted a spell on me. Well, not really on me, but on my eggplant. I remember ever since that day, I was actually pretty excited to go to art class, because the more I looked at her, the more bricked I got. And well, honestly, I'll tell you one thing, I did a lot of trips to the school bathroom. Yes, I'm embarrassed to say that, but honestly, you guys can't blame me. But anyways, I remember one time there was a moment in class where basically we were doing just normal painting. I remember this was like 4 months after the whole pottery class thing, and basically we were just, you know, doing normal, like I believe it was like wet painting. I don't really know. Like I said, I don't really care about art, but basically we were doing this like wet paint art thingy. And basically, I remember one time my art teacher came up to me and told me that I was doing it all wrong. She got actually like pretty irritated at me or upset with me, but at the same time, she ended up basically getting me a new canvas and started helping me out with it. And one thing I realized is that like I got really bricked up when she came near me. And basically my teacher, she looked at me and then she looked down and she realized that I was bricked. Like no joke, she saw my hard on eggplant and she looks at me and looks in my eyes and says, "Okay, Bubba, can we have a conversation, please?" Sure, is what I told her. And then she ended up saying, "But we're going to like talk after class, okay? I just want to have a discussion about something." "Oh yeah, that's totally cool with me," is what I ended up saying afterwards. I remember that moment, I thought I was gonna get in trouble or something about like, you know, formal student teacher etiquette or something. But honestly, I remember after class, I ended up just staying in my seat as all the kids were leaving and the teacher ended up walking up to me. She said to me, "Okay, Bubba, I'm gonna be real honest with you. I know you're attracted to me." "Yeah," is what I said. And then from that moment, I remember she came up really close to me and said, "Well, you're lucky you're attractive if you're graduating next year, aren't you?" "Wait, what?" is what I said. And then from there, I remember she ended up grabbing the paintbrush that I was actually using and ended up putting it on her tongue. She made it like, you know, very spicy, I would say, towards me. And one thing led to another. We ended up going into this dark room that was basically a storage closet for the art class to store their art to dry off. And I'll tell you one thing, things got really wet in there. And I don't mean the wet paintings, if you know what I'm saying. That was a really bad one. But anyway, sorry. Going on though, I remember me and her, we ended up doing the Devil's Tango in there. And we were in there for a good 30 minutes. But I remember since it was like only midway through the day of school, another group of classmates ended up going into the classroom as well. And me and her, we didn't really realize that because honestly, time just got out of our hands. And one thing led to another. When we were finished, we basically came out of the closet. And as I was zipping up my pants and as she was putting on her top and we exited the closet, there was a whole batch of students just looking at me thinking, what in the world did this kid do? Yeah, let's say the whole class ended up catching me doing it with my art teacher, but honestly, I don't regret it. One thing I will say is that I learned a lot about biology. I guess you could say I learned 2 classes at one. All right, so what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba, and welcome back to another insane story. So today's story takes place back when I was in high school, and funny enough, this was back in my high school years of me being a dumb teenager. And if you guys know this channel a lot, you guys know I am pretty much one of the guys in my high school that always did the Devil's Tango. And let's just say today's story does get really insane. But before I fully get into it, I just want to say a special announcement. Since Christmas is coming up, we are doing a Christmas advent calendar on my Discord server, meaning that there are going to be fun challenges, games, streams, and movie nights all throughout this week. And also, not to mention, there are awesome giveaways that you guys can participate in. So if this interests you at all and you guys want to have some fun this holiday season, make sure you guys do click the link down in the description down below and join the Discord server. Anyways, let's get straight into this awesome story. So knowing this, honestly, I think one of the classes I really struggled with back in high school was science class. No, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not bad at science, but at the same time, I'm one of those kids that when I go to school, I only want to learn subjects I actually care about. Like for example, keyboarding, I love typing on keyboards and also doing computer stuff. So honestly, it was easy. Let's just say all the easy classes I wanted to do and all the classes that really took my mind to really put into work, I did not want to do. And science was one of them. I remember one day though, I was going into my science class and when I entered in there, I remember my buddy came up to me saying, "Yo, Bubba, real quick, bro, did you know they changed the science teacher?" I remember I was really confused because we had like the same science teacher for like the first 3 months of our science class being a thing for our semester, but then they ended up changing it to some chick that we never even heard of. We're just gonna call her Miss M. Now, Miss M, apparently a lot of people were talking about her throughout the school, saying that she was one of the most attractive teachers they've seen, and on top of that, she was very jitty. If you guys know what jitty means, basically like she's really like upbeat. She's really perky. That's a better word for it. So knowing this, I was like, okay, well, whatever. How bad could it be? So I remember I ended up going into my classroom, and afterwards, when I went in there and sat down, I remember I saw this teacher walk up in front of the class, and she was one perky lady. Like, no joke, she literally started the class off with like her hands together saying, "All right, class, get ready for an amazing day." And when I looked at her, the more I thought about it, I could not figure out how old she was. Like, no joke when I say this, I thought she was like either in her 20s or in her 40s. Like, it was that weird of an age gap that I could not tell how old she was. And obviously, don't get me wrong, I could just put my hand up and ask her, "How old are you?" But at the same time, I feel like that could lead to a lot of bad things. I don't know, my mom always told me never ask a woman how old they are because, you know, it's not the right thing to do. But at the same time, though, you can never tell what's what anymore. Like, seriously, there are 12-year-olds that look like they're 20. Like, this world's really gone downhill at this point. excellent. Anyways, going on with the story. I remember when this teacher was teaching the class, one thing I really realized was that she kept staring at me for no reason. And every time like she asked a question, she looked at me first with eye contact and then looked at all the other students right after. It was like she was expecting something from me and I have no idea what. Obviously, I didn't answer any of the questions that she asked that science class, nor did I even care, to be honest, because like I said earlier in the video, I didn't really pay attention to school, nor did I care enough for it. But then I remember after a while, she asked this one question that was really bizarre. She said, okay, Bubba, so can you tell me, do you have 11 protons? I remember I looked at her and I'm like, what? Protons? What do you mean? And then she said afterwards, really oddly, because you are sodium fine. What is what I said? I remember so confused. And then afterwards, a bunch of students started laughing, especially like the smart kids in the back of the classroom that were sitting there. They all looked at me and said, do you not understand what she just said, loser? And then I remember I looked at her and I'm like, huh? I didn't understand the question because I thought I got the answer wrong, which I obviously would have if I ended up saying, wait, what? But you guys know what I mean. But then she just ignored the question and then just kept working in the classroom and teaching the class. Now, honestly, I had no idea what happened in that moment. I remember I was really confused, and then afterward, my buddy texted me saying, dude, did you not understand what just happened? And as I quickly glanced at my phone, I texted him back saying, dude, I have no idea what you mean. And then literally he ended up texting me back saying, the teacher just flirted with you, bro. Like literally just flirted with you in front of all of us. I remember I looked around and I saw everyone just staring at me still, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. And ignored it and just kept listening to the class. Anyways, after class, I remember everyone got up and the bell rang, and basically I was ready to leave my classroom, but right before I left, I remember the teacher ended up saying, hey, Bubba, can you come here real quick? I remember I turn around and I look at her, I'm like, yeah, what's going on? And then afterwards, I ended up walking up to her and she said, yeah, so I was just wondering, do you need like extra help in class? Because like I'm down to help you every day after school for a bit. And I remember I looked at her and I'm like, am I failing my class? Because if I wasn't, then I wasn't gonna stay, obviously. But then afterwards, she ended up going to her computer, looking at me, looking back at her computer, and then says, yeah, you're actually failing. You're at a 42%. I remember I was so confused because the last teacher that before he left, he ended up saying that I was at a 65. So I was passing, but now I'm failing 45%. What? None of it made sense. So I remember I ended up looking at her saying, all right, I guess I'll do some extra courses because, you know, she said she would help me out. So obviously, I remember during that day, I remember going to my other classes and kind of panicking, but at the same time, weirded out how randomly I was failing a class that I thought I was doing good in, or at least passing. I remember I was super confused and I was just doing my own thing, doing my own classes. And afterwards, my buddy walked up to me saying, dude, it's so weird how that teacher flirted with you in science class. And after I looked at him, I'm like, yeah, but dude, I'm failing my class. He ended up looking at me saying, what? We were passing literally not even before she came. And that's when I started to think a bit differently. I thought maybe that she was making me fail just so I would see her. So I was gonna go confront her, but honestly, at the same time, I'm not gonna lie, guys. She wasn't like ugly, you know what I mean? Like she looked young, but at the same time, she looked old. I don't know. It just got to the point where I was questioning in my mind, should I do this or not? Then I remember after school came, and basically I ended up, you know, going towards her classroom when the bell rang, and I ended up going into the classroom, and she looked at me and said, hey, Bubba, welcome to class. I remember I looked around and I saw no one was there. It was just me. And you would think for a person that's, you know, trying to help other students to pass their class, there's no way I'm failing science out of the whole school. Like seriously, out of the entire school, I'm the only one failing science class. That made no sense. But anyways, I ended up sitting down and I ended up basically starting to, you know, listen to what she was teaching and stuff. And every time she would teach something, she kept making a pickup line. Like I remember the other one she said, she was literally like, are you made of copper and tellurium? Because you are C-U-T-E, cute. And I remember when she said that, I was just so weirded out. It got to the point where I just didn't want to be there. And I kept, you know, telling her, honestly, like, don't get me wrong, I like the lines and the pickup lines and stuff, but it's not really like my way of learning. Then I remember when I said that, she ended up looking at me and saying, oh, really now? And then she ended up coming really up close to me. And it seemed like that she had the eyes of like the devil's tango. Like she wanted to do it. So I remember as she came up to me and then literally out of nowhere, she ended up kind of like grabbing my like shoulders. And then she ended up coming down towards the side of my face. And she ended up giving me a kiss on the cheek saying, you're really cute though. At that point, I knew what was going to go down. And I kind of just didn't think it was the right moment because we were literally in a classroom. And at the time, I'm not going to lie, I didn't know if there was like cameras in the classroom, but at the same time, I didn't really care even though it already kind of just started happening. And let's just say one thing led to another. She ended up getting really close to me and yeah, she ended up sitting on top of me and we ended up, I guess, doing the devil's tango on the literal desk. Yeah, not the teacher's desk, on my student desk. So you got to think a student desk with a teacher on top and me hitting it from behind. You know what? Actually, I don't want to get demonetized, but you guys know what I mean. Anyways, long story short, that ended up happening for like 20 minutes. And I remember out of nowhere, the janitor that was in our school ended up kind of like walking down to each classroom and he ended up knocking on our classroom and looking through the window and seeing what was going on. I remember he ended up entering in and saying, yeah, you two students shouldn't be in here. Come on, get out of here. Get out of the classroom. I got to clean it up. So I remember we both ended up putting our clothes on as fast as we could. And it seemed like the janitor didn't really care, which was a good thing, I guess. And then afterwards, I remember my science teacher ended up just leaving with me. and acted like she was a student in the school, even though she was the literal teacher. But I guess the janitor doesn't really know that. So going on from there, I remember me and her, we ended up just going to the parking lot, and she ended up just telling me, oh, that was a close one. Hopefully no one finds out. And then she ends up going into her car and driving away. Just like that. She didn't even say bye to me. She just said that she was happy we weren't caught. And honestly, I would say that's the last time I ever talked to her, but let's just say she was my teacher. So obviously it wasn't the last time. But let's just say another time when she went under my desk, well, that's where things got really, really intense. But hey, it is what it is. I remember in the middle of yoga class, my yoga teacher ends up saying to me, Bubba, after class, can you help me with some stretching I need to do? And at that moment, I realized that the things I was stretching was not what usually you're supposed to do in yoga. But I mean, I did it anyway because, yo, what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba, and welcome back to another crazy but embarrassing story. This story all starts off back in my high school years, and this was actually back when I was in grade 10. Now, in grade 10, I played rugby. If you guys don't know what rugby is, basically think of football, but 10 times more rough without the armor. Yeah, kind of insane. But I remember playing rugby back when I was younger. I wanted to play an active sport and not just be known as a theater kid, since in grade 9, all I took was theater. And that was to help me with my stutter, but not the point. Anyways, I remember one day after school, I ended up going to rugby practice, and during rugby practice, we were doing like practice games with me and my other teammates. And let's just say one giant dude in my team that would usually take out most of the competition ended up running straight for me since I was left wing, and he ended up tackling me down so bad to the point where I hurt my leg really badly. To the point where I even yelled, ow, my leg! It got to the point where the coach stopped the game, and he ended up walking over to me, realizing that my leg was severely bruised and actually somewhat swelling. So my parents ended up picking me up from school that day, and they ended up helping me out, and actually they realized how bad the pain was, and they ended up taking me to the doctor. When I went to the doctors, I was super annoyed because like waiting for the doctor is like so annoying, especially for how long it takes. But I remember the doctor ends up looking at my leg after like 3 hours of waiting in the waiting room, and he ends up saying to me, yep, that looks like a really bad one right there. Have you ever taken yoga? What? Yoga? No. Well, I would advise you take yoga. Yoga might actually help out with your pain and, you know, stretch those muscles to make sure you don't get injured so easily again. So you just want me to take yoga? Yes, it'll help with the pain and make things a lot better later on. At that moment when he said to take yoga classes, I remember right away my mom was already surfing through the internet for yoga classes that a teenager could take. And let's just say what ends up happening next was actually really weird, because I remember the next day after school, I ended up basically going to my mom's car because she picked me up and she drove me over to this yoga studio that was actually somewhat near my place. She ends up taking me there saying, Bubba, you have to do yoga. You have to stretch and make sure your muscles don't get hurt. Yeah, but like, mom, yoga's like for girls. Yes, but also for people that are injured, and you are injured. Okay, mom, whatever you say is what I told her. And I ended up entering inside this yoga studio with my mother. When I got in there, I remember I ended up seeing a lot of like actually pretty fine women, but a lot of them were like married mothers, so I can't really do much there until I saw my yoga teacher. Now, my yoga teacher was actually, funny enough, a girl that went to a different high school, and she was apparently like a really good yoga teacher because she took like the courses early throughout her high school years. So I remember when I entered inside and saw her, she ends up looking at me super confused and walks up to me. She walks up to me and says, you're someone I haven't seen here before. What are you doing here? Oh, I'm here for yoga. My leg got injured recently, and like the doctor said to like, you know, stretch it out, and I guess you're here to help me out with that. Oh, well, yeah, 100%. Here, go on one of the mats and just follow along with the class. At that moment, my mom ended up leaving the building, and at that moment, I stood on the yoga mat super embarrassed, because the whole time a bunch of moms were looking at me confused on why in the world there was another dude in the class, because the only other dude that was in there was some gay dude. So me hoping that everyone didn't think I was just a random gay dude as well, the class started, and they started doing really like a lot of different positions. Like we started stretching our legs, we started stretching our torsos. Basically, we did basic yoga stuff. If you guys don't know what yoga is, then my advice, take it if you need it, not if you want to, because I don't really see any upsides to yoga, even after taking the class. But I remember the whole time when we were doing these like stretching and positions and stuff, the yoga teacher that was the high school student ends up walking up to me saying, Bubba, you're supposed to like do this. And she ends up grabbing my thighs and stretching them out even more. It felt really uncomfortable that she was actually getting that close to my eggplant, but 100% she noticed that after like a minute of her trying to stretch me out, which sounds really weird. YouTube, please don't demonetize this video. But after like her of like basically trying to stretch me out, she noticed that I basically got bricked. Yeah, kind of awkward, but at the same time, you gotta understand when you're filled with the room with a bunch of moms that have massive cherries and a yoga teacher that's actually pretty fine and hot as well from a different school, it's kind of bound to happen, don't you think? So from there, I ended up looking at her. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do a different position. Oh, yeah, okay, you can do that. And she ends up getting up and walking away. At that moment, I thought I totally just embarrassed myself and ruined every chance I got to getting with any woman in the yoga class, which is not really the point of me going there, but still better than when I was there there originally for. But weeks went on of me going into the yoga class. It was actually funny enough, like 2 weeks I was there, and I went there basically every second day. And every time I would go, the yoga teacher that was there would always look at me really weirdly ever since that day passed of her basically seeing me get bricked. And one thing led to another. Well, let's just say after 2 weeks, things got really awkward. Because I remember after when class ended one time in yoga class, she ends up walking over to me saying, "Hey, Bubba, what do you usually do after class?" I don't know. I usually go home and just play video games. Since I'm injured, I can't really play rugby anymore. Oh, you played rugby. What school do you play for? Oh, I just play for my school that's near my place. And right as I told her my school's name, she ends up actually looking at me kind of freaked out. And she's like, "Oh, my ex actually is on your rugby team, I think." Oh, okay. Cool, I guess. Yeah, anyways, what are you doing after the next class? I have no plans. Why? Okay, well, let me know. I might have an idea for you to help with your leg. Okay. At that moment, she ends up winking at me and walking away. And I was really confused, but at the same time, maybe this girl had like some interest in me, or maybe she was interested. I don't really know. Maybe she was gonna ask me out, but at the same time, if she was, why didn't she just ask me when I was already there? It made me really confused, but I decided to basically ignore things. And I remember when I got home that day, I ended up playing Call of Duty. And the whole time when I was basically at home, I kept thinking about what this girl wanted to do with me until after tomorrow finally came around. Because I remember I ended up going to my yoga class after my mom dropped me off. And when I entered inside, I ended up seeing my yoga teacher wearing one of the most tightest outfits I've ever seen her wear. Now, during yoga, it's normal to wear tight outfits, so obviously no one else was weirded out. But what she was wearing definitely got me more excited than average. And I remember when class started, the whole time I couldn't stop staring at her to the point where she actually ends up coming up to me saying, "Hey, so like, are you still free after class?" Yeah. Okay, cool. After class, meet me in my office. Okay, cool. What are we doing? Well, I'm gonna like help you with your leg, obviously, and like, you know, do some personal stretching. Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, if it helps with my leg, sure. Oh, it'll help with all 3 of your legs. All 3? At that moment, I thought she was like maybe like, you know, talking about some spiritual leg that she like, you know, knew about in yoga terms. I don't really know, but I remember when class finally ended, all the moms ended up leaving the building, and me, I ended up walking into her office. And when I walked in there, me and her started stretching together, and we started doing like, you know, downward dog and other positions that are apparently really good in yoga. Until randomly, I remember when I was basically watching her stretch one position that she was showing me, she ended up telling me to go behind her. And well, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, we ended up doing the devil's tango because she wanted to help me out with my thrusting, I guess. I don't really know, to be honest, and I can't say anything more than that because I don't want to get in severe trouble online. But yeah, we ended up doing the devil's tango. And things got really, really weird because I remember right after class ended, she ended up handing me a form that said that I was allowed to play rugby again. I ended up looking at her saying, "Wait, you know, if I get this, I can't enter the class anymore, right?" Well, yeah, obviously, but I mean, after that, I'm sure your leg's totally okay. And well, I don't know how she did it, but she was right because my leg felt totally cured afterwards. Maybe she had some magic potion inside of her. You know what? That's really weird. Anyways, guys, that's basically it for today's story. Make sure you guys press that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like I always say, follow for more embarrassing stories just like this one. Peace out, guys.